Thank you, Ranking Member Lofgren. We'll now go to witness testimony. Our first witness today is Mr. Adam Thierer. Mr. Thierer is Senior Fellow for the Technology and Innovation Team at the R Street Institute. He previously spent 12 years as a Senior Fellow at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. He also previously served as the President of the Progress and Freedom Foundation. Mr. Thierer, you're recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Thank you. Chairman Oberholty, Ranking Member Stevens, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the invitation to participate in this important hearing. My name is Adam Thierer, and I'm a Senior Fellow at the R Street Institute, where I focus on emerging technology issues. Related to this hearing, I recently released a 3-part R Street series entitled Ramifications of China's DeepSeek Moment, and I have appended those essays to my written testimony. I'll begin with an admission. I am as stunned as just as all as you are about how fast China has caught up with America in artificial intelligence. In fact, in testimony just 10 months ago before the Joint Economic Committee, I noted how lucky America was that our AI innovators were firmly in the driver's seat and not yet having to worry about China surprising us with a powerful new AI system that might represent a modern Sputnik moment. And then in late January of this year, my worst fears came true when that AI Sputnik moment happened with DeepSeek's January 20th launch of its open source R1 model. It sent shockwaves for tech markets and policy circles alike, and rightly so. DeepSeek's model competes favorably with leading American models and at a lower cost. President Trump and many other policymakers have referred to it as a, quote, wake-up call for our nation. But what happened next was equally stunning. Just days after DeepSeek's R1 launch, Alibaba, another Chinese tech giant, announced the most powerful version yet of its Qwen model, which outperformed R1. DeepSeek responded by announcing it would release an even more capable version of its model. Chinese tech giant Tencent Holdings then launched its T1 model that outperformed both of those models and some American models. Finally, Manus AI, a Chinese startup, launched a powerful new general AI agent. All of this happened in less than 2 months. Perhaps these developments should not have surprised us. After all, the Chinese Communist Party has made its imperial ambitions clear with its stated goal to become, quote, the world's primary AI innovation center by 2030, and the CCP uses aggressive forms of innovation mercantilism in pursuit of that goal. The House Select Committee on Strategic Competition between the U.S. and the Chinese Communist Party has highlighted how, quote, the CCP has pursued a multi-decade campaign of economic aggression against the United States and its allies, end quote. More problematically, the CCP is engaged in a concerted effort to export digital authoritarianism through its Digital Silk Road effort meant to spread influence through global investment. Experts now speak of a China-led, quote, authoritarian tech offensive and the rise of, quote, an AI axis of autocratic states looking to advance their control agendas through technology. I believe there are 3 lessons from the DeepSeek moment. First, China clearly understands that AI is the most important general-purpose and dual-use technology of our era. AI is essential to both widespread economic development and national security goals. Second, China understands that AI is also the most important information technology of modern times, and that it has profound potential to influence cultural values and speech policies globally. Third, China understands that rapid diffusion of AI both drives these objectives in many ways. China is flooding the market with nimble but very effective AI systems, just as they have previously used low-cost, rapid response strategies to gain greater market share globally in other sectors. These are the reasons why House Energy and Commerce Committee Chairman Brett Guthrie recently argued that China's rapid ascendancy in advanced computation, quote, really is an existential threat to our country and the world. If America is going to win the so-called AI Cold War, we need to understand that traditional containment strategies won't work. We're not going to bottle up all Chinese AI advances with analog era controls, and costly and poorly targeted industrial policy gimmicks won't help much either. We won't beat China by copying China. Instead, America must race ahead and stay on the cutting edge of the technological frontier to win. We must re-embrace the core advantages in this fight with China that we've always had: freedom, the freedom to innovate, invest, speak, learn, and grow using advanced technological systems. In the 1990s, we did this with a flexible governance approach that helped America dominate the digital revolution, and we can do it again in a bipartisan fashion. Here's a very quick checklist of the pro-freedom technology agenda that we need to advance AI opportunity in America. We must embrace open source AI innovation and let it blossom. Ensure diverse energy markets for AI. Win the talent war by attracting the world's best and brightest scientists and engineers. Ensure balanced copyright and data privacy policies. craft a national framework that preempts and puts a moratorium on the confusing patchwork of now almost 1,000 state and local AI proposals pending today. Require federal agencies to review their existing policies to determine how they might hamper AI. Ensure agencies have the resources and training needed to address novel AI issues. And, of course, defend the importance of free speech in the algorithmic age. This opportunity-oriented AI agenda is the way to beat China. We must not allow fear-based policies to impede American AI development and diffusion, or else China wins. Thank you for holding this hearing, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Thierer. And I'll lead off by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Thierer, thank you very much for your testimony. You had mentioned, you gave a pretty comprehensive list of the ways that we need to act to ensure continued American leadership in AI development. And one of the things that you mentioned that caught my attention was the nearly 1,000 pending bills in state legislatures across the country on the topic of AI regulation. Could you talk a little bit more about why you think that that's a threat and what you think that we in Congress need to do about that?
Absolutely. So, Mr. Chairman, I know this has been a priority of yours, and in the House AI Task Force report, this was something that was highlighted specifically both in the section on federal-state relations, but also in the section on small business, where the House AI Task Force bipartisan report basically made clear that the growing complexity of all of the differing definitions and regimes for AI regulation could eventually become a formidable barrier to new types of entry and the so-called rise of little tech or open source AI systems. I think that's a chronic problem when you have nearly 1,000, as of this morning, 958 state bills, or total AI bills, most of them being state, are pending. They haven't all passed yet, but a lot of activity, and again, a lot of different definitions of even how to define AI. If you're a small business person in this country and you are making an attempt to break into a marketplace, but you're confronted with that many different regulatory regimes and all that red tape, that is going to really set back your ability to become a leading edge competitor on the fly to compete with the things like DeepSeek and others that we see coming out of China. You know, for all of the restrictions that Chinese AI operators face, a lot of the smaller entrepreneurs have a lot of leeway to go out there and do things in a really flexible, nimble, low-cost fashion.
So how should we in Congress respond to that?
I think you've teed up the idea, Mr. Chairman, in the past of some sort of preemption. This is squarely interstate algorithmic commerce and speech we're talking about with a lot of this stuff. And we, in the 1990s, had a bipartisan agreement with this Congress, which was Republican at the time, and the Clinton-Gore administration, to have a national framework be part of our Telecommunications Act of 1996, and then our 1997 Framework for Global Electronic Commerce, and then even a moratorium we had a year after that with the Internet Tax Freedom Act of 1998. That was a really wonderful model. It established a national framework, said here are some rules that we're going to set for the road about how it works. The whole process has now been inverted. The states are driving and Congress is waiting. Congress needs to step in and either set some clear guidelines for how the states do these things, or, in my opinion, we should have a moratorium on aggressive forms of new AI regulation to make sure we don't shoot ourselves in the foot as this race with China gets underway.
Sure. Well, I mean, obviously, I very much agree with you. We had a whole chapter on preemption in the AI Task Force report, but one of the points that we make is we can't preempt something with nothing, which means that we need to get busy in enacting some of the recommendations in that report to create a comprehensive framework for AI governance at the federal level. And then I think we'll have the moral authority to preempt what the states are doing and to set what the guardrails are, because there'll be a role for them as well. I want to thank you very much for that.
Okay, thank you. And then let's see, the Stanford Institute for Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence recently released their 2025 AI Index report, which indicated that private investment in U.S. AI was $109.1 billion in 24, more than 10 times the amount invested in China, $9.3 billion. Earlier this year, the Stargate project announced a $500 billion investment in American AI. Mr. Thierer, what is more important for U.S. leadership in AI, federal funding or a permissive environment that allows for private sector investment and innovation?
Yeah, we obviously need that private sector investment to be high, as you just reported, Congressman. And basically, the number you cited there, what's even more exciting about that being 10x higher than what China's invested in terms of private AI investment, is that that's over a 10-year period, it was only 4x. We were averaging about 4 times as much as China. That's still great news, but last year it was almost 11 times as much, actually. So we need more of that, and what yields that kind of private sector investment is a more permissive, permissionless innovation type environment where we encourage innovators to go out and do bold things.
Exactly. Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Probably go to a couple of you, but Mr. Thierer, I'm going to start with you. It's fair to say that labor, knowledge, investment are the three things that you need to add to our current leadership position if we're going to stay where we are or even increase what was earlier described as now a sub-1-year lead. Is that correct?
That's exactly right, Congressman. And I'll just point back to the excellent work that this House AI task force did on this issue in its chapter on labor and STEM and education.
Okay, Mr. Thierer, am I pronouncing that close enough? Okay. If what we need is, in fact, to beat China, and China has 1.2, 1.4 billion people, and 300,000 of them are currently studying in the U.S., in fact, do we need to look at our policy toward educating Chinese in no small portion in the curriculum that they take back to use against us in competition?
Well, I believe if brilliant people want to come here and study and work, that's wonderful for America. We did this with the Soviets. We brought their best and brightest here, gave them opportunity, and encouraged them to stay. I'd like to see that same policy for Chinese students.
You hit the major point that I was getting to.
Like many others, comparing them to tools that we have here in the U.S., like ChatGPT, and it was quite impressive. I think there's some strengths and some weaknesses, but overall, I was impressed by both the capabilities as well as the cost compared to the capabilities. And we've been talking a lot about an AI Cold War today, and I would just put the question to the panel as short as you can. Has China already passed us in this AI Cold War? And if not, how close are they? I'll go, sorry, Mr. Thierer.
Well, I think obviously the race is tightened. I mean, 2 years ago, when we had, 2.5 years ago, when we had the ChatGPT moment, that was the reverse Sputnik moment for China, right? That's when they were surprised and taken aback, and we were clearly sort of in the lead at that point. But before that time, we all thought China was in the lead. You read the books from like 2017 to about 2020, it was all about what China was doing. And now we've entered that era again where China is caught up, nimble, low-cost systems. They do this very effectively, especially with their utilization of open-weight models. Mm-hmm. And so that is a very real legitimate neck-and-neck race. These were two prize fighters going at it. So this is why our policies we have to get it right now.
There's a huge opportunity in healthcare, too. You get one cure, you save trillions of dollars, certainly hundreds of billions of dollars, which obviously, has positive impact as it relates to our deficits and our debt.
Absolutely. Congressman, I have a multi-part series for the R Street Institute called AI and Public Health Series, and it talks about all of the different types of amazing innovations that are coming about due to AI and machine learning, and then specifically cites the cost savings for our very expensive public health our health system more generally. And so I think that's what you're going to there is like we can find better efficiencies, but also better cures, help people live longer, healthier lives.
Yeah. Any other comment on that? What are the key steps to making sure we have the right regulatory framework so that you have innovation, it's not stifled, but at the same time you have guardrails in place?
You know, in 1997, I mentioned that the Clinton administration put forward the framework for global electronic commerce that many Republicans in Congress agreed with, which was a market-based, idea-driven, kind of opportunity-driven environment and ecosystem for the digital economy and the internet. And that worked wonders. You just look at the natural real-world experiment we've had over the last quarter century on either side of the Atlantic between us and Europe, and you ask yourself a simple question. Name Europe's leading digital technology innovators today. It's silence. We just can't. There's only a few. And the reality is the household names in Europe are American companies. Why? Because we got the policy prerequisites of growth and opportunity right for the internet. We can do it again for AI.
If I may.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, witnesses, for being here today. I always learn something when we have expert witnesses such as yourselves. I guess my first question goes to Mr. Thierer. While protecting against foreign AI threats is crucial, excessive regulation or restrictive policies could slow down the U.S. innovation and put American companies at a disadvantage. So how can we strike the right balance between national security measures, ensuring that the AI innovation and entrepreneurship in the U.S. continue to thrive?
Well, thank you for that question, Congressman, and greetings from a fellow Hoosier. I think the answer to that question is we first need to step back and understand what the nightmare scenario looks like. And that would be if the Chinese systems, like DeepSeek and their successors and its other competitors, become global standards across the world because they have created low-cost, nimble systems that, especially their open source systems, that ultimately spread through concerted efforts like their Digital Silk Road and the Belt and Road initiatives, where they're actually trying to lure many other countries, especially in the global south, into a desire to be partners with them. And that's part of that, AI axis that we talk about, the danger of that and the spread of their sort of control regime through technological systems. So American systems need to lead. We need to make sure that we're not shooting ourselves in the foot and that we become global standards, just as we did in the internet age. But now we've seen a turn. We see like Huawei and other companies, becoming more predominant in the hardware side of things and offering investments to these countries. We need to make sure our companies are there first so we don't restrict them too much in what they want to do globally.
Chairman, for holding this important hearing, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. So applications from Communist China have a history of collecting personal user data on a level that presents a national security risk. You only need to look at the scale of data collection from TikTok and that Chinese companies are required to turn over personal data to the CCP at their request. DeepSeek's V3 and R1 models exemplify this risk, with DeepSeek overtaking American companies like OpenAI to be top-rated AI app on U.S. App Store. So, to Mr. Thierer, does DeepSeek collect data beyond just the chat logs from its users? And does that data that's collected by DeepSeek present a clear threat to our citizens' privacy and our national security? And how can we mitigate that risk?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. We don't know the full extent of data collection on that side of things, but of course that danger is always very real. This is why some state governments and others have looked to make moves to stop DeepSeek from being utilized by government employees, and that's an understandable concern. But clearly more study is needed on that important question.
Sounds like Star Trek. Mr. Thierer, with my remaining time, just a brief question. Can you tell us more about what regulations states are pursuing and how China's AI development efforts should affect state and federal policymaker attitudes towards regulating AI?
Well, it's funny you should ask that, Congressman, because in Utah, there's actually a pretty good model. Utah passed a really good model for
That's
AI.
why I'm asking.
It's a good setup. Well, I just think that model that Utah's pursued is really smart because it obviously focuses on first studying the issue, being patient, forbearing from over-regulating, focusing on agency capacity and existing governmental uses of AI, and then also has that experimental sandbox idea built into the back end of it where you actually encourage innovators to come and talk to state policymakers to figure out how they can maybe pursue exciting projects in a more collaborative way.
Thank you very much for pointing out the regulatory sandbox, which I was part of in the state legislature a few years ago, and we're proud of that. Utah is a great model for this. And Mr. Chair Obernolte, thank you very much. I yield back.
Would you agree that if they're copying us, they're not really catching up? Now, they maybe can close the gap a little bit, but like you guys said, they're anywhere from 6 months to 2 years behind us because they're not coming up with their own technology. They're not coming up with their own chips. They're not leaping ahead of us. They're actually just trying to copy us, which doesn't help them actually surpass us. Is that accurate?
I generally agree with that, except that I think the Chinese have made some significant inroads lately in terms of doing genuine innovation and finding ways to diffuse it throughout the globe. So we can't just take it for granted that they're just strictly copying or using industrial espionage or mercantilist, efforts to, follow. They are taking the lead on some important things, including things we haven't talked about here today, like robotics and other types of autonomous systems, battery systems, EVs, things like this. They've made real progress there.
And I think you made a really good point, actually. They've been very, very strategic in the way they've gone after elements and cornering the market. And you talked about batteries, lithium, cobalt, things that we need for future energy sources. I think that very much is a big concern, because that's not even technology. That's just being smart in how you get those elements that we need to even produce chips, for that matter, silicon and other things like that. So I agree with you.